It involves things like temperature. Certainly when things get warmer, it certainly slows us down a little bit. Have you ever noticed that when you go to a seminar, run, very professionally, they'll keep the room a little cooler, to keep you awake. And certainly temperature plays a big role. So be aware of the temperature factor. The other factor that you want to have, control over is the lighting situation. Your optimal learning environment has to have a certain level of lighting, and we're talking about ideally the best kind of light. For me personally, I react best for nature's light. So like indirect sunlight is works perfect for me. So to be able, under perfect conditions, under indirect sunlight. The light that doesn't work out really well for me personally, my experience, like dim light, obviously, so you want it to be enough so your eyes aren't straining. Fluorescent lighting also doesn't work really well. And you could just Google that and see how it works for you and see how that kind of lighting works. And certainly, what we'll do is we'll go to the store and find light bulbs that are closely lit, or pardon the pun, closely matched to sunlight as possible. Other things that would be good for your learning environment is minimizing distractions. Minimizing distractions, because certainly too much noise, too many people, too much external stimulus, in your environment. You want to minimize that so you can really focus and concentrate. And I would also add this in this perfect, learning environment. I would have a lot of positive anchors. Positive anchors are things that put you in a certain mood. Photographs, quotes, pictures of people that inspire you or that care about you. Things that really put you in a peak state, because certainly the environment plays a role, and you want to be able to control that and have as much things that inspire you and make you creative as possible, especially in a learning environment. So that's the first P. The next P again is your physiology, and physiology, huge. Okay, so before, when we give you these ideas on how to read, I want to really do a physiology check. Like if I was to ask you right now to be sitting in a way that totally inspired you, to be sitting in a way that just knowing that what I'm about to say is going to just be life altering and literally transform your life, that you feel like that the words coming out of my mouth are just unbelievably profound, and what you're about to get out of it is going to change your life. How would you sit? How would you be sitting right now? And if you change your posture, why did you have to change it? All right, because the first thing is your posture. And what I'm here to say is that there's a certain peak posture for reading a book, okay? And I would say that the peak posture would be sitting up straight with your feet on the ground and your back straight, okay? And one of the reasons why is because the challenge is if you're bent over with your posture, now, first of all, it collapses. What organ does it collapse? It collapses your lungs, right? And so you're not going to be able to do the next thing, which is called breathing, right? Because breathing is huge. That your brain is probably 2% of your body weight, but it uses like 20-30% of the oxygen that comes in. Yet when you collapse your lungs, literally it's more difficult for oxygen to get in the lower half of your lungs, which is where most of the oxygen is being absorbed into your bloodstream. And you want a lot of oxygen in that bloodstream because that's what's feeding your brain, right? And so you want to sit up straight, okay? And again, I might be saying the obvious, right? But it's not always common sense, is not always common sense, if you will. That what we're talking about here, a coach is not somebody who always tells you something that's so profound. Sometimes a coach is telling you what you already know, but saying in a way that gets you to do it. Or saying like, hey, this is what you do when you do things well, and this is what you have to be doing when you feel like you're not getting the most out of yourself. And so breathing and your posture plays a huge role in your focus and your energy. Because the first thing I would say is people say they don't have enough energy and they get tired, is that really you want to sit there and take some deep diaphragmatic breaths. Okay? Because think about, people think they should eat something, and what I'm here to say is, well, let's really evaluate this. How long can you go without food? Right? Weeks. Some people go weeks without food, when they fast and such. How long, but can you go without water? Days, right? But how long can you go without breathing? Minutes. So the first thing I would say is if you're not feeling the energy in your body or in your mind, or you have that brain fog, if you will, I would take some deep diaphragmatic breaths and relax and bring more oxygen into your body. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is drink water. Again, your brain is only about 2%, 3% of your body weight, but yet it's made up of 80% water. Your brain is made up primarily of water, just like your body is about 60, 70% water. What do you think, you need to be drinking a lot of? And so, I would say a lot of water and a lot of water-rich foods probably help you to have a lot of more energy, because especially your brain is bioelectrical. And so it needs that water there. If it gets a little dehydrated, it's not going to perform as well. So always be drinking your water. And then the fourth thing about your physiology I want to mention is the book position. And that is actually how you're holding the book. And I won't show you exactly how to hold the book, because it's more subjective. It's kind of like how your body feels most comfortable. But what I will say is that if you take your book and lay it down flat, if I have the posture upright, now you want to have that posture upright. The other reason besides collapsing the diaphragm is because that's a more visual posture. Okay, or if you have 3 learning styles, and I teach this in the quick thinking program that we do, right? We have quick recall is the memory program, quick reading is the speed reading, focus, retention, comprehension program. Quick thinking is the advanced program on how to learn your fastest, how to teach your best, how to be an effective listener, how to make decision making, how to do decision making, the multiple intelligences, your preferred learning style, and we do all the assessments. But one of the things is you have 3 different learning styles. You have visual, you have auditory, and you have kinesthetic, which is your feeling. And there's also a corresponding visual physiology in terms of your posture, and your eye movements and your breathing and everything. But what I want to say for this, without going into detail of that program, is that being upright keeps you into a visual mode. And a visual mode of learning is where, and that's what reading really is. It's primarily dominant visual, is that you want to be upright. Here's the challenge. If your book is laid flat on the table in front of you and I'm upright, imagine, do those words look smaller or bigger at that angle? That if you're seeing the words on the page at an angle like that, are the words appearing smaller or bigger? Of course, they're smaller, right? So the challenge is what a lot of people do if they lay their book out flat on the table in front of them, they'll want to go directly facing the book. And in order to do that, what do you have to do? You have to change your posture, right? You have to change being upright to being hunched over and slump. Again, getting out of visual mode, getting into kinesthetic mode more, and then also collapsing your diaphragm, which cuts off more of the oxygen to your brain and your mind. So if you don't change your body then, and you want to look at the words under optimal conditions and see as much of it as possible, then if you don't move your body, what do you have to move? The book, right? So you have to tilt the book so it's facing your eyes. All right, so I want to make sure that you're holding the book in a way that's tilted. Maybe you're crossing your legs and you're resting the book onto your knee or what have you, but find a book position of holding the book in a way that allows you to see as much of the page as possible at a direct angle as opposed to a slant, and also keeping your body upright. Okay? So that's your physiology. The third P stands for your psychology. And how important is your psychology? Because as I said before, all behavior is state dependent, but certainly all learning is state dependent. Psychology. So psychology plays a huge role in how you're actually going to learn something, because your mental assets, when we're going back to your attitude and you're talking about your thermostat and you're talking about the state that you're in, all of that plays a role. Okay, and so how would I describe, and this is what what the entire quick thinking program is about, just to give you an abridged version. How do you get in that peak state, that peak curiosity, fascination state? And I would say the first thing is going back, control your environment and control your physiology. Because how many people know that if you create an ideal environment or place, if you will, then your psychology, your mindset, your attitude just gets better automatically. And the opposite is also true. If you're in a place where there's lots of clutter on your desk and a lot of disorganization, and there's bad smells in the room, or there's too much loud noise, or your physiology has changed because, let's say, you've had too much alcohol or what have you, all of that changes your psychology, because all learning is state dependent. And what puts you into good psychology? Again, going back to your breathing, because as there is, a body-mind connection, there's also mind-body connection. So you want to do the deep breathing because your body affects your mind again. But I would also say you want to listen to, relaxed music. One of the things you could do to change your psychology automatically is playing inspiring music. And specifically the music that we talk about in the quick recall program and the quick thinking program, there's certain music that puts you into a peak relaxed state, a relaxed state of awareness, a state that they call your alpha state. There's 4 different states of brainwave states: alpha, beta, theta, and delta. And the alpha state, and this is the whole quick thinking again, the alpha state is that state of relaxed awareness. And one of the things that will put you in that state is this kind of music, nature music sounds will do it. What state will also put you in that state? Baroque music. So Baroque music is a certain music from a certain era that Vivaldi, Bach, the music that a lot, especially the music that has about 60 beats per minute. So because what they'll find is that your state will entrain and harmonize with that, and it also happens to be resting heart rate. So it's unbelievable. You want to be able to use music and get in that relaxed alpha state. The other thing that will put you in the right psychology is when you read, have an unbelievable, and we'll talk about this when we talk about in the session on comprehension, be curious. Be curious. I mean, be fascinated. And one of the reasons why children learn so rapidly is because they know they don't know. So they're a clean slate, and they're very open to new ideas. So get yourself into that positive state of expectancy, like you're about to learn something unbelievably powerful, that you want to put yourself into a state and control like your self-talk, your incantations, your affirmations, if you will, because that definitely plays a role. When you say that you're not going to get it, you're not going to get it. When you say that I have a bad memory, you're going to have a bad memory. But when you say that, wow, this is fun, when you direct your focus and say, every day in every way I'm getting better and better, that the more I practice, the better I get, that I am absolutely committed to learning this and mastering this, that certainly plays a role. A lot of you know that I'm a runner, and I read this book on the science of running, and it was actually how to run a marathon. And I was preparing for my first marathon, and the chapter I was reading was on the psychology of running a marathon. Because I was like, okay, I got the training part down, but what's the mental strategies, the mental attitude I need to have when I'm approaching this? And in the chapter it said this: it said your mind is like a supercomputer, and your self-talk is a program it will run. So if you tell yourself say yourself, I am not good with names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your computer not to. That's almost verbatim. Isn't that incredible? And obviously, it's kind of comical, with what we teach with memory training, but it's very, very true. So you want to monitor your self-talk. Going back to remember the 5 obstacles to effective reading, the 5th one was the limiting beliefs. All right, and there's something called learned helplessness. Learned helplessness. It's kind of like, is it really that we're helpless in certain situations, or is it kind of like you see that elephant that's tied to a rope at the circus carnival, and you wonder, why is that elephant just pulling away? Because that elephant could take down the whole tent if it wanted to, but how did they train those elephants? When it was first born, they would tie that rope, and put that stake in the ground, and then naturally that elephant wants to move and move and move and free itself, because that's its natural instinct, is to have that freedom and that autonomy, yet it can't because it's not strong enough. And then after days and maybe weeks of trying, it just gives up. You know what I mean? It just gives up. And later on, as it grows stronger and stronger, obviously it has the ability to be able to get itself free, but it still doesn't, because in its mind, the rope is still there. That it's not as strong as it once was, as it presently is. And that's sometimes what it happens with our reading or our memory. At some early age, which we're not aware of, it happens in our unconscious, something happened and it determined, and it set a standard for us as how smart we are. And again, intelligence is not even a matter of intelligence as it is a matter of skills. We either learned how to learn quickly or we didn't. And this is what this program really is about. And so setting that positive expectancy for you to be able to learn is so important. The next one, the fourth P, is procedure. And really the procedure, again, is the what, is the strategies that I'm going to give you while you read in this system to be able to read with better focus and understanding and greater speed. Okay, that's really the what, and that's really where the rubber meets the road, comes from the next P, which is practice. But this is the tools I'm going to give you throughout this program and these sessions. And specifically, I want to start you out with one right now. And I'm here to tell you that you can improve your reading speed and possibly your focus 25 to almost 50% or more, some of you, just by using this one thing. And that is using a visual pacer. Using a visual pacer. And what's a visual pacer? Let me ask you. When I ask people to learn how to read, especially children, or if you get a child when they're first learning to read, first of all, they use part of their body to help them focus. What part of their body is it? Their finger, right? And now, depending on what kind of school system you go through, a lot of people are taught not to use their finger while they read. Well, I'm here to tell you that, again, go into that common sense corner of your brain and test it yourself. And I'm going to give you the reason why, but is that using a visual pacer, your finger, a highlighter, a pen, a pencil, even a computer mouse, if you will help improve your reading speed and focus about 20 to 25%, 50%, even more. And I'm not asking you to believe everything I'm saying. What I'm here to say is the expert is not always the person that you're listening to or who is on stage or that's writing the books. You are the expert. You know you better than anybody else. So what I'm here to say is, don't take anything I'm saying as fact. It's a buffet. Find out what makes sense to you, test it yourself, and then keep what works. But I'm going to give you the reasons why that I think that using a visual pacer or your finger while you read will help you and serve you. First of all, children do it. Okay, so it's kind of interesting that the fastest learners on the planet are children, and they naturally want to use their finger to help them read. Second of all, you do it. And you're saying, well, no, when you asked me to read in the beginning of this program when we did the assessment, I didn't use my finger while I read. Well, you didn't, because most people aren't taught to do that. But how did you count the words that you read? So if you're reading it, most of you went like this. When I asked you to count the number of lines you just read, you went 1, 2, 3, and you pointed to every single line. Because your eyes, the third reason why you want to use your finger while you read, first of all, it's very convenient because you carry it along with you at all times. But the third reason is your eyes are attracted to motion. Your eyes are attracted to motion. If something went across the screen right now, a little elephant, when I talked about the story about the elephant pulling out and it just ran across the screen, you wouldn't, look at anything but that elephant because your eyes are attracted to motion. It's kind of like you're a hunter and gatherer, years and years ago, and it's survival, right? It's like you're in a bush, there's a rabbit in front of you. You have to look at the rabbit that's moving, but also if the bush next to you moves, your eyes naturally will look at that bush in your peripheral vision. Why? Because it's like it could be lunch, right? Or you could be lunch. Either way, you better look at what's going on in your environment. So your eyes are attracted to motion. That's the third reason why you want to use your finger. Because when you're using your finger to read, your eyes are pulled through the information as opposed to your attention being pulled apart. All right. Fourth reason why you want to use your finger is it's kind of like how your nervous system is set up. It's like if I ask you, let's say have you ever tasted a great piece of fruit? Like right from the tree or right from the farmer's market, not something that's been waxed and sprayed and sitting in a grocery store somewhere, but like a fresh piece of fruit. Have you ever tasted that? Well, let's say you're tasting a peach. Are you really tasting a peach? In actuality, you're not really tasting the peach as much as you're smelling the peach. Because your tongue really doesn't taste as much of the flavor as you think it does for a peach specifically. What you're doing is you're smelling the peach. But your nose and your mouth are so closely linked, your nervous system, if you will, that you don't know the difference. You know the difference though when you're sick, because when your nose is congested, what does food taste like? A lot of it tastes bland, right? You hold your nose when you don't want to taste something that you have to taste, like medicine or something. But your mind doesn't know the difference because your sense of smell and your sense of taste are so closely linked. Just like your sense of smell and your sense of taste are so closely linked, so is your sense of touch and your sense of sight. Okay, that if we had a little infant here, and you had your car keys, and you said, hey, little Jimmy, look at my keys, look at my keys, look at my keys, and you shake them in front of you, what is little Jimmy naturally going to want to do? Naturally, he's going to want to touch the keys and taste them, right? But touch them, because little Jimmy, for him to feel like he sees the keys, he feels like he needs to touch them, because the psychology, again, the nervous system, your sense of touch and your sense of sight are so closely linked, and you don't know the difference all the time. And sorry, here, maybe you do. If someone loses their sense of sight, how do they read? If someone loses the ability to read with using their eyes, how do they read? They read with braille, right? Using their sense of touch. And literally, when I have people, thousands of people go through this, and I have people using their finger while they read. One of the things I hear most of all, when I ask about their comprehension, they say it's increased. Now, obviously, it's increased because they have better focus, but it's also increased because they feel like, these are the words that they say, I feel like I feel more in touch with what I'm reading. Now, listen to the predicates there. The words I'm using, visual. Like I feel when they're reading, they're looking at what they're reading, they feel more in touch, kinesthetic with what they read because they're using their hand. All right, so I would encourage people to use their finger, encourage you to use your finger while you read. And so we're talking about the eyes, so you want to have really good eye health here, right? And then one of the things I would do recommend when we're talking about physiology is get your eyes checked. Get your eyes checked, because a lot of people who have trouble reading or learning, sometimes what doctors will find, it's not a learning challenge as much their how they're processing. It's the visuals, their eye health. So you want to make sure you have good eye health. So you have your eyes, you have your sense of touch, but it also helps to have this brain inside your mind. And this is your gray matter, right? Your gray matter, and it has three parts that we talk about in the quick thinking program. You have your reptilian brain, you have your mammalian brain, which is your middle brain, and you have your neocortex, which is your new brain. And your neocortex, what I want to talk about here, it's just fancy words, your gray matter. You have millions and millions, hundreds of millions of brain cells here, and you have a left side and your right side. You have a left side of your brain, your left and your right side of your brain. And your left side of your brain deals with mostly what? What does your left brain deal with? Things like logical, things like words, things like languages, things like sounds, right? Your very left brain. We have whole assessments in the quick thinking program on determining which one you're dominant in. But your right brain, if your left brain is logical and sequential, what's your right brain? That's more imagination. That's your storehouse of creativity. You have some emotions that are processed there. You have your visualization. So I'm asking you to visualize something. You'll be lit up more in your right brain. Now, looking at this, what do you think reading is mostly? A left brain or right brain process for most people? What is reading for most people? Left brain or right brain process? And what I'm here to say is, for most people, looking at it logically, as a clue, it's more left brain, right? It's the logical sequential words and sounds, sub-vocalizations happen in your left brain. And what I want to say is that, why use just half your brain?